27 years. That is how long it takes to believe you know someone completely. To stop questioning the small things, the late evenings, the calls he always took in the hallway. I was cleaning his office on a Saturday in November when I found it. A plain white envelope tucked inside a folder labelled Insurance. Inside were documents I had never seen, a name I didn't recognise, a bank account opened the same year we got married. I sat down on the floor of that office and held those papers for a very long time. And then I made one phone call that changed the next chapter of my life completely. I share this with you now because I know there are women listening who have felt that same cold drop in their stomach. The moment when the ground you thought was solid turns out to be hollow. If you have ever loved someone completely and later discovered they were never fully honest with you, this story is for you. I want you to share it with every woman in your life who deserves to know that she is not alone in what she has been through. Please consider subscribing to this channel, because what I found inside that envelope is only the beginning of what I had to do to reclaim myself. My name is Joan Wright. I am 67 years old. I live in a 2-story brick house on a quiet street outside Savannah, Georgia, where the azaleas bloom so thick in April you can barely see the green leaves beneath them. For 40 years, I worked as a head librarian at the local high school, a job that taught me patience and the value of keeping things in order. I have a habit of smoothing the fabric of my skirt when I am nervous, a small, circular motion with my right hand that my husband Charles used to say looked like I was trying to iron out the wrinkles in the world. I built my relationship with money carefully, quietly, never displaying it, saving every extra dollar from my paycheck into a credit union account that only I knew the number to. For most of my life, I believed I had done at least one thing right: raising a good man. For 42 years, Charles and I lived in this modest brick house, raising our son David. Charles used to say, a home wasn't the walls, it was the years inside them. We saved for decades to pay off the mortgage, skipping vacations and buying second-hand furniture, until the day we burned the final payment statement in the fireplace and watched the paper turn to ash. That house was not just wood and nail. It was the physical manifestation of every sacrifice I had ever made. It was the place where I nursed David through chickenpox. It was the place where I sat up all night waiting for Charles to come home from his shift at the plant. It was the place where I learned that love is often a quiet thing, unnoticed until it is gone. David is 42 now. He works in sales, a job that requires him to smile too much and talk too fast. He has a good heart, but it is a soft heart, easily pressed into shapes by stronger hands. His wife is Vanessa. She is 39, and she moves through rooms like she is inspecting them for dirt. She wears clothes that cost more than my monthly grocery budget. They have 2 children. Lily is 10, and she has Charles's eyes, the kind that look right through you to see what you are thinking. Matthew is 7, and he is quiet, always hiding behind his mother's leg when guests arrive. I love them. I love them so much it hurts to look at them sometimes. I love them enough to know that what was coming would break them if I did not handle it correctly. The house smelled of lemon polish and old books. It was a warm smell. It was a safe smell. In the living room, we had a sofa upholstered in a deep green velvet that Charles had bought for our 10th anniversary. It was worn at the arms, where he used to rest his elbows while reading the newspaper. The kitchen had yellow curtains that I washed every month, They snapped clean in the wind when I opened the window above the sink. I loved that sound. It was the sound of a life that was taken care of. I loved every inch of that house because I had paid for every inch of it with my time. I knew where the pipes groaned in the winter. I knew which floorboard creaked in the hallway. I knew where the light hit the floor at 4 in the afternoon. It was mine. And I did not know yet that there were people inside my own family who believed it belonged to them. I want you to understand the warmth of that home before I tell you how it turned cold. I want you to see the sunlight on the kitchen table. I want you to smell the coffee brewing in the morning. Because when you lose something, you must first know what it was worth. I sat in that kitchen every morning for 20 years. I watched the sun rise over the oak tree in the front yard. I watched the seasons change the colour of the leaves. I thought I was watching the passage of time. I did not know I was watching the countdown. There was a shadow moving in the corner of my eye that I refused to name, and it was getting closer. The life I had before that discovery was simple, but it was mine. I remember a Tuesday morning in late October, just 3 months before Charles died. The light was coming through the kitchen window in those long, dusty beams that only happen when the air is cold enough to see your breath inside the house. Charles was sitting at the table reading the newspaper, the same way he had every morning for 40 years. He was wearing his blue flannel shirt, the one with the patch on the elbow that I had sewn there myself. He looked up at me when I put the coffee down and he smiled. It was not a big smile. It was the kind of smile that said, "I see you, and I know what you did." He reached out and took my hand. His hands were rough from years of work, the knuckles swollen slightly from arthritis, but his grip was warm. He told me not to worry about the roof leak. He said he had called a man named Miller who had come out on Friday. He told me to sit down and drink my coffee while it was hot. Then he said the words that would haunt me for the next year. He said the roots hold the tree, Ellie, not the leaves. He always called me Ellie when he wanted me to remember who I was beneath the noise. I laughed and told him I was not a tree. He said, "No, you are the ground. You are the thing everything stands on." I did not know then that he was preparing me for the time when the leaves would try to claim they were the roots. We had a cherished memory from that year, just before the sickness took him. We drove down to the coast, to Tybee Island, even though it was too cold for swimming. We walked on the beach wrapped in thick wool coats, holding hands so tightly our fingers went numb. We stopped at a small diner, where the waitress knew our order without asking. Charles ordered the eggs over easy, and I ordered the oatmeal. He slipped a $10 bill to the waitress and told her to keep the change, even though the bill was only $12. He did it because he knew she had a baby at home. He did it because he believed in being kind when no one was watching. That was the man I married. That was the man I thought I knew. I remember the way the wind smelled that day. It smelled of salt and diesel fuel from the ships in the harbour. We walked near the water until our shoes were wet. Charles stopped and looked out at the ocean. He did not say anything for a long time. He just stood there with his hands in his pockets. I asked him what he was thinking. He said he was thinking about how long the water had been there. He said it would be there long after we were gone. He said it did not worry him. He said it was nice to know some things stayed. I took his arm. We walked back to the car. He hummed a song the whole way home. It was a song from when we were young. I have not heard it since. I cannot listen to it now. It hurts too much. But there was a small, wrong thing at the end of that day. When we got home, Charles went to his study to put away some papers. I heard the lock click. It was a sound I had never heard before. He always left his study open. He always said a husband should have no secrets from his wife. I stood in the hallway for a moment, my hand on the wall, listening to the sound of him moving files inside. I told myself he was just organizing his taxes. I told myself he was protecting me from worry. But I felt a cold spot form in the center of my chest, right behind my sternum. I went to the kitchen and washed the coffee cups. I dried them slowly. I put them away in the cupboard where they had lived for 20 years, and I did not ask him about the lock. That sound stayed with me. It was a small thing, a click, but it was different from the other sounds in the house. The house creaked, the pipes hummed, the fridge buzzed. But a lock clicking in a room that was never locked was a new sound. It was a sound of separation. I smoothed my skirt. I told myself I was being foolish. I told myself Charles was tired. He had been working late at the plant. He was worried about his pension. He was worried about David. There were many things a man could worry about. I did not want to add myself to the list. I went to the living room and sat in my chair. I picked up my book. I read the same page 3 times. I did not remember a word of it. I was listening for the door to open. I was waiting for him to come out. He did not come out for an hour. When he finally came out, he looked normal. He asked me what was for dinner. He said he was hungry. He kissed me on the cheek. His skin was warm. His breath smelled of mint. He was my husband. He was the man I had slept beside for 42 years. I looked at him and I tried to see the stranger. I tried to see the man who locked the door, but I only saw Charles. I only saw the lines around his eyes. I only saw the grey in his beard. I pushed the thought away. I told myself it was nothing. I told myself I was imagining things. But the thought did not leave. It sat in the corner of the room. It waited. It watched. And when the sickness came, it was waiting for me there too. The event that changed everything happened 6 weeks later. It was not a dramatic collapse. It was not a car accident. It was a Tuesday evening, just like any other. Charles complained of a headache after dinner. He went to lie down on the sofa in the living room. I brought him a glass of water and 2 aspirin. I sat in the armchair opposite him and read my book. I looked up after 20 minutes to ask him if he wanted more water. He did not answer. His eyes were open, but he was not there. I called his name. I shook his shoulder. I felt for a pulse in his neck and found nothing but stillness. The silence in that room was heavier than any noise I had ever heard. I called the ambulance. I called David. I called my sister. I did everything a woman is supposed to do when the world ends. But inside, I was floating. I was watching myself move through the rooms, packing a bag for the hospital, finding his insurance card, signing the papers that said he was gone. The grief did not hit me until 3 days later, at the funeral. I stood by the grave while the dirt was shoveled onto the casket, and I felt my knees buckle. David caught me. He held me up. He whispered that he was here, that he would take care of me. I believed him. I leaned into him. I let myself be small because I thought I had someone to hold me up. The physical sensation of grief was not sadness. It was weight. It was as if someone had filled my pockets with stones. I could barely walk. I could barely breathe. My chest felt tight. My throat felt closed. I ate nothing for 3 days. I drank only water. I sat in the living room and stared at the empty sofa. I expected him to walk in. I expected him to ask for his coffee. I expected him to tell me not to worry about the roof. But the house was quiet. The house was too quiet. The clock on the wall ticked too loud. The refrigerator hummed too low. Every sound was wrong. Every shadow was wrong. I was alone in a house that was built for two. That was when she entered. Vanessa. David's wife. She'd always been polite to me. Distant but correct. She wore a black dress that cost more than my monthly grocery budget. She held my hand at the reception and told me she would handle everything. She said I did not need to worry about the arrangements. She said she knew how much I loved Charles and she would honor his memory. She smiled when she said it. It was a warm smile. It was a helpful smile. But I saw her eyes move around the room, calculating the value of the furniture, the size of the house, the number of people who had come to pay respect. She was not looking at the grief. She was looking at the assets. I recognized that look. I had seen it in the eyes of people who came to appraise the library books when the budget was cut. It was the look of someone deciding what was worth keeping and what was worth selling. David stood beside her. He looked tired. He looked lost. He held her arm like it was a lifeline. He did not look at me. He looked at the floor. He looked at the guests. He looked at Vanessa. He did not see what I saw. He did not see the calculation in her eyes. He saw a wife who was helping. He saw a woman who was taking charge. He was grateful. He squeezed her hand. He thanked her for being strong. I stood there with my hands clasped in front of me. I smoothed my skirt. I did not say anything. I did not want to cause a scene. It was Charles's day. It was not the time for arguments. But I felt a shift in the air. I felt the balance of the house change. It was no longer my home. It was becoming something else. Something that could be divided. Vanessa came to the house the next day. She brought a box of tissues. She said I would need them. She walked through the hallway. She touched the wall. She looked at the pictures on the shelf. She asked me if I wanted her to take them down. She said it might be too painful to see them. I said no. I said I wanted them to stay. She nodded. She said okay. But she looked at the pictures like they were obstacles. She looked at them like they were things that needed to be moved. I watched her hands. They were manicured. They were soft. They had never worked a day in their life. They were hands that took. They were not hands that gave. I knew then that I would have to be careful. I knew then that I would have to watch. But I did not know how much I would have to endure before I could speak. For the first few weeks after the funeral, the changes were small. I told myself I was imagining them. Vanessa started coming over every day. She said she wanted to make sure I was eating. She brought casseroles and disposable aluminium trays that she never asked me to return. She moved the chair in the living room. She said it caught the light better near the window. She reorganized the spice cabinet. She said it was more logical this way. She made comments about how much things cost. She asked me why I still bought the generic brand of coffee when David could afford to send me the expensive kind. She suggested a new routine. She said I should let her manage the bills. She said it was too much for a widow. I adjusted. I told myself she was helping. I told myself I was being ungrateful. David did not notice, or he pretended not to. He came over on Sundays. He sat on the sofa where his father had died. He asked me how I was holding up. He did not ask me what I needed. He did not ask me if I was lonely. He listened to Vanessa when she spoke. He nodded when she suggested things. He was not evil. He was weak. He was captured by the stronger personality of the woman he married. He wanted peace. He wanted to avoid conflict. And he was willing to let me become the conflict to keep that peace. I saw him looking at me sometimes with a kind of pity, as if I were a child who did not understand how the world worked now that Charles was gone. One day, Vanessa moved the lamp. It was a lamp Charles had bought me for our 20th anniversary. It was brass. It was heavy. She moved it to the corner. She said it was a tripping hazard. She said she did not want me to fall. She said David would be worried. I looked at the spot where it had stood for 20 years. There was a circle in the carpet where the dust had not settled. The rest of the carpet was grey. The circle was green. It looked like a ghost of the lamp. I did not say anything. I let her move it. I watched her plug it in the new outlet. I watched her straighten the shade. She smiled at me. She said there. Much better. I said yes. Much better. But I felt something in my chest tighten. It was a small thing. A lamp. But it was my lamp. And she had moved it without asking. Mrs. Gable lives next door. She is 72 years old, and she has lived on our street since before David was born. She brought me a plate of cookies 2 days after the lamp incident. She sat at my kitchen table and looked at me. She said, "Joan, you look tired." She said, "Vanessa has been here a lot." She said, "Be careful who you let hold the keys." I almost ignored her. I told her Vanessa was family. Mrs. Gable patted my hand. Her hand was rough. Her skin was like paper. She said, "Family is who shows up when you are hungry, not just when there is something to take." I thanked her for the cookies. I put them in the cupboard. I did not eat them. I watched her walk home through the window. She walked slowly. She looked back at the house. She shook her head. I turned away from the window. I washed the plate. I put it in the dryer. I did not put the cookies on a plate. I left them in the box. The house felt different with the lamp moved. The light fell in a different place. The shadows were longer in the evening. I sat in my chair and I tried to read. I could not focus. I kept looking at the corner where the lamp used to be. I kept looking at the new spot. I tried to tell myself it did not matter. It was just a lamp. It was just a piece of metal and glass. But it was not just a lamp. It was a boundary. It was a line that had been crossed. And once a line is crossed, it is easier to cross it again. I knew this. I had seen it in the library. I had seen it in the school. I had seen it in the world. But I did not want to see it in my home. I wanted to believe that my son would protect me. I wanted to believe that my daughter-in-law loved me. I wanted to believe that I was safe. But the lamp was in the corner, and I was alone in the room. That night I dreamed of Charles. He was standing in the hallway. He was pointing at the study door. He was saying the roots hold the tree. He was saying it over and over. I woke up sweating. My heart was beating fast. I got out of bed. I walked to the hallway. I stood in front of the study door. It was closed. It was locked. I put my hand on the knob. It was cold. I did not open it. I went back to bed. I lay there until the sun came up. I did not sleep again. I waited for the morning. I waited for the day to start. I waited for Vanessa to come back. I knew she would. She came every day. She came like clockwork. And I knew that today would be different. I knew that today she would ask for something more. Then came the first disrespect. It was a Thursday afternoon. Vanessa was in the kitchen making tea. I was sitting at the table sorting through mail. She looked at me over her shoulder and said lightly that I seemed to be forgetting things lately. She said she had found the gas bill unpaid in the drawer. She said maybe I should write things down more often. Her voice was soft. It was concerned. But it was a comment about my memory. It was a comment about my age. It was a remark about how much space I took up in my own home. I felt my hands start to smooth my skirt. I stopped it. I put my hands flat on the table. I told her I had paid the bill. It was just late. She smiled and said, "Okay, just checking." She poured the tea. She did not offer me a cup. Later that day, I was in the hallway hanging up my coat. I heard a phone call through the closed door of the study. Vanessa was inside. She thought I had gone to the grocery store. I heard only a word or two. She was saying a number. The number was familiar. I recognized it because it was the balance of my savings account. I stood there with my coat in my hand. I did not open the door. I did not confront her. I went back to the kitchen and finished washing the dishes. I scrubbed a spot on the counter that was already clean. I watched the water run over my hands. I thought about Charles. I thought about the lock on the study door. The water was hot. My hands turned red. I did not feel the heat. I was thinking about the number. How did she know the balance? I had not told her. I had not told David. I kept my statements in the safe. I kept my passwords in my head. I had been careful. I had always been careful. But she knew. She was speaking it out loud. She was speaking it to someone else. I turned off the tap. I dried my hands. I walked to the window. I looked out at the street. Mrs. Gable was walking her dog. She looked up at the house. She waved. I did not wave back. I pulled the curtain closed. I did not want her to see me. I did not want anyone to see me. I felt like I was being watched. I felt like I was being hunted. I rationalized it. I told myself she must have seen the mail. I told myself I must have left it out. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself she was trying to help. She was managing the bills. She needed to know the numbers. That was what I told myself. But I did not believe it. I knew in my gut that it was wrong. I knew in my gut that she was not helping. She was gathering. She was collecting information. She was building a case. But I did not know what the case was for. I did not know what she was planning. I only knew that I was the subject. I was the problem. I was the thing that needed to be managed. Mrs. Gable came over the next day. She did not bring cookies. She brought a newspaper. She sat at the table. She said, "Joan, I need to tell you something." She said, "I saw Vanessa talking to a man from the bank. She said he was standing in the driveway. She said they were looking at the house." I said, "Maybe she is refinancing." I said, "Maybe she is helping David." Mrs. Gable shook her head. She said, "No." She said the man had a clipboard. She said he was measuring the windows. She said he was not a bankman, he was an appraiser. I felt my stomach drop. I felt the cold spot in my chest again. I said, "Are you sure?" She said, "I am sure. I know an appraiser when I see one. I have seen 3 in this neighborhood this month." I thanked her. I told her I would look into it. I walked her to the door. I watched her go. I closed the door. I locked it. I stood in the hallway. I looked at the study door. It was closed. It was locked. I walked to it. I put my hand on the knob. I did not turn it. I walked away. I went to the kitchen. I made a cup of tea. I sat at the table. I drank the tea. It was cold. I did not notice. I was thinking about the appraiser. I was thinking about the number. I was thinking about the lamp. It was all connected. I could feel it. It was a pattern, and I was in the center of it. But I did not know what to do. I did not know who to call. David would not believe me. He would say I was worried. He would say I was imagining things. So I said nothing. I waited. I watched, and I kept my hands still. I did not smooth my skirt. I held them tight in my lap. I held them until my knuckles turned white. The pattern became undeniable over the next week. I stopped receiving mail. I knew this because I walked to the mailbox every morning at 9. Sometimes there was nothing. Sometimes there were flyers, but the statements from the credit union stopped coming. I called the bank. They said the statements were being sent to the primary address on file. I said that was my address. They said it had been changed 3 days ago. I asked who changed it. They said a woman named Vanessa Wright. I said she was not authorized. They said she had power of attorney. I said I did not sign that. They said they had a copy on file. I hung up. I stood in the kitchen holding the phone. My hand was shaking. I put it down. I smoothed my skirt. I did not cry. I went to the sink. I washed a glass that was already clean. I dried it. I put it away. I did not tell David. I knew what he would say. He would say she was helping. He would say I was worrying too much. He would say she loved me. But love does not steal your mail. Love does not hide your money. Love does not lock you out of your own life. I began to watch her differently. I stopped looking at her face. I looked at her hands. I looked at what she touched. I looked at where she stood. She stood in the study more often. She stayed there for hours. She said she was organizing Charles's papers. She said she was helping me sort through the grief. But I knew what organization looked like. I was a librarian. I knew how to file. I knew how to label. She did not label. She stacked. She piled. She took things out and did not put them back. I saw her take a folder from the shelf. It was blue. It was the same color as the envelope I had found in November. I said nothing. I stood in the doorway. I watched her put it in her bag. I watched her zip the bag. I watched her smile at me. She asked if I wanted lunch. I said no. She said okay. She left. I went to the shelf. I touched the spot where the folder had been. It was dusty. The rest of the shelf was clean. She had touched only that one spot. I knew then that she was looking for something specific. I knew then that she had not found it. That evening I was in the laundry room. The door to the kitchen was open. Vanessa was on the phone. She thought I was upstairs. I stood behind the washing machine. The noise was loud. I turned it off. I listened. I heard her voice. It was low. It was precise. She was saying a number. The number was familiar. I recognized it because it was the balance of my savings account. She said to the person on the other end that it would not be enough. She said we need the house equity too. She said she is old. She won't fight. I stood by the washing machine. My hands were on the cold metal. I felt the vibration of the spin cycle even though it was off. I heard her say the word mortgage. I heard her say the word sell. I did not react. I turned the machine back on. I let it spin. I went back to the kitchen. I finished washing the dishes. The water was hot. My hands turned red. I thought about Charles. I thought about the lock on the study door. I thought about the roots. Charles's old phrase came back to me then, exactly the way he used to say it. The roots hold the tree, Ellie, not the leaves. I stood at the kitchen window and I thought, he knew. He always knew. For the first time since the funeral, I felt something that was not grief. It was clarity. And clarity, I had learned, was the most dangerous thing a woman like me could possess. The next day, Vanessa grew bold. It was a Tuesday. We were having dinner. David was there. He was eating the roast beef. He was looking at his phone. Vanessa was talking about her sister's house. She was saying how much better it was to downsize when you get older. She was saying how much easier it is to live in a community where people take care of you. She looked at me. She smiled. She said, "Joan, you know my husband hid his true self for 27 years. She said it calmly. She said it in the kitchen. She said it in front of at least one witness. David looked at his plate. He did not look up. My hands were in my lap. I was holding my napkin. I crushed it slowly. I did not look at her. I looked at the window. I saw the reflection of the room in the glass. I saw myself sitting there. I saw her sitting there. I saw David looking down. I heard the clock on the wall ticking. It was loud. I heard the hum of the refrigerator. I heard my own breathing. It was shallow. I decided in that moment that I was done being a guest in my own life. I decided that I would not leave this house unless I chose to. I decided that I would not let them steal the memory of the man I loved to pay for their comfort. I put the napkin on the table. I stood up. I said I was tired. I went to my room. I locked the door. It was the first time I had locked it in 40 years. I acted in secret for the first time the next day. Vanessa was out. David was at work. I went to the study. I used the key I had kept on my keychain since the day Charles died. I opened the lock. I went to the bookshelf. I moved the encyclopedias. Behind them was a small safe. I knew the combination. It was our anniversary date. I opened it. I found a folder. It was blue. It was labeled Trust. I took it out. I did not read it there. I put it in my bag. I went to the kitchen. I made a cup of tea. I sat at the table. I opened the folder. I found a document. It was a bank statement. It was from a bank I did not know. The name on the account was the Joan Wright Protective Trust. The value was written in bold numbers. It was $3,200,000. I stared at it. I counted the zeros. I read the date. It was created 5 years ago. It was created by Charles. I did not confront anyone. I photographed it with my phone. I copied the account number. I put the folder back. I locked the safe. I moved the encyclopedias back. I went to the living room. I sat in my chair. I smoothed my skirt. Vanessa came home an hour later. She asked me what I did all day. I said I read. She smiled. She said that was good. She did not know. She continued to believe everything was proceeding. She continued to plan the sale of the house. She continued to treat me like a burden. I watched her. I waited. I felt something that was not grief. It was clarity. And clarity, I had learned, was the most dangerous thing a woman like me could possess. I made an appointment with the trusted advisor. His name was Mr. Henderson. He had been Charles's lawyer for 30 years. His office was in downtown Savannah, in a brick building that smelled of old paper and leather. I went there on a Wednesday morning at 10 o'clock. I wore my best suit. I wore my pearls. I wanted to look like someone who belonged in a lawyer's office. Mr. Henderson was an old man. He had white hair and kind eyes. He stood up when I came in. He shook my hand. He said he was sorry for my loss. He said Charles was a good man. I sat down. I put my bag on the table. I told him I needed to know about the trust. He looked at me. He did not look surprised. He opened a file on his desk. He said Charles told him I would come eventually. He said Charles wanted to wait until I was ready. He named the hidden power for the first time. He said it was the Joan Wright Protective Trust. He said the value was $3,200,000. He said it was created by Charles 5 years ago. He said the legal structure was an irrevocable trust. He said the money was mine. He said no one else could touch it. He said not even David. He said Charles knew. He said Charles knew that David was weak. He said Charles knew that Vanessa was hungry. He said Charles built this wall to keep me safe. The tone shifted there, from grief to quiet certainty. I sat in the leather chair. I looked out the window. I saw the street below. I saw people walking. I saw cars driving. I saw the world moving on. I realized I was not a burden. I was a woman with resources. I was a woman with options. I thanked Mr. Henderson. I stood up. I shook his hand. I walked out of the office. The air was warm. The sun was shining. I got in my car. I drove home. I did not smile. I did not cry. I just drove. I knew what I had to do. I knew I had to wait for the right moment. I knew I had to let them hang themselves with their own rope. Then came the false peak. I went home. Vanessa was there. She was smiling. She said she had good news. She said she found a buyer for the house. She said we could close in 30 days. She said I could move into the condo she picked out. She said it was smaller. She said it was easier. She said it was better for me. I listened. I nodded. I said I would think about it. She looked relieved. She thought she had won. She thought I was giving in. It seemed for one paragraph as if the situation might resolve on its own. I could just sign. I could just leave. I could avoid the fight. Then a new blow arrived. David came home. He looked upset. He said Vanessa had told him I was refusing to sell. He said I was being difficult. He said I was holding on to the past. He said I needed to let go. He said it was for my own good. I looked at him. I saw his face. I saw the stress in his eyes. I saw the way he looked at Vanessa when she spoke. I realized then that this was not just about money. This was about control. This was about erasing me. This was about making sure I never had a voice again. I stood up. I said no. I said I was not selling. David looked at me. He looked shocked. Vanessa stepped in. She said I was confused. She said I did not understand the market. She said I was making a mistake. I heard the conversation. I was in the hallway. The door to the bedroom was open. Vanessa was on the phone. She thought I was asleep. She was saying a number. The number was familiar. I recognized it because it was the balance of my savings account. She said to the person on the other end that the account is empty. I told you. She said she is holding out. She said we need to force the sale. She said we can claim incompetence. I stood in the dark. I held my breath. I listened. I heard her say the word lawyer. I heard her say the word court. I heard her say the word soon. I went back to bed. I lay there. I stared at the ceiling. I thought about Charles. I thought about the trust. I thought about the rope. I knew then that I could not wait any longer. I knew then that the next move would be mine. And I knew exactly how to make it. I stayed in bed until the sun was fully up. I listened to the house wake up. The pipes groaned. The fridge hummed. The floorboards settled. I waited until I heard Vanessa's car start in the driveway. I waited until the engine faded down the street. Then I got up. I put on my robe. I went to the study. I opened the safe again. I took out the folder. I took out the deed to the house. I took out the trust document. I put them in a manila envelope. I sealed it. I wrote Mr. Henderson's name on the front. I did not shake. My hands were steady. My eyes were clear. I felt a calmness that I had not felt since Charles died. It was not happiness. It was readiness. It was the feeling of a storm that has finally broken. I went to the kitchen. I put the kettle on. I waited for the whistle. I watched the steam rise from the spout. I thought about the tree. I thought about the roots. I thought about the leaves. Charles's old phrase came back to me then, exactly the way he used to say it. The roots hold the tree, Ellie, not the leaves. I stood at the kitchen window and I thought, he knew. He always knew. For the first time since the funeral, I felt something that was not grief. It was clarity. And clarity, I had learned, was the most dangerous thing a woman like me could possess. I poured the water. I made the coffee. I sat at the table. I drank it black. I did not smooth my skirt. I let my hands rest on the wood. I felt the grain beneath my palms. It was solid. It was real. I was ready. I want you to stop for a moment, because some of you know exactly what I mean when I talk about finding something you were never meant to find. Have you ever discovered a secret about someone you completely trusted? Tell me in the comments. You do not have to share everything. Even one word is enough. I will read them all. And tell me where you are watching from. I know there are women in London and Lagos and Johannesburg listening to this. I know there are women in Trinidad and Memphis and Savannah. We are everywhere. And we are stronger than they think. I called Mr. Henderson an hour later. I told him to come to the house. I told him to bring the papers. I told him to come at 2. He said he would be there. I called the real estate agent. Vanessa had invited her to discuss the sale. I told her to come too. I told her David would be there. I told her Vanessa would be there. I told her I would be there. She said she was glad I was ready to move forward. I said we would see. I hung up. I went to the mirror in the hallway. I looked at myself. I saw the lines around my eyes. I saw the grey in my hair. I saw the woman who had buried her husband. I saw the woman who had raised her son. I saw the woman who had kept the house. I did not look old. I looked alive. I put on my blue dress, the one Charles liked. I put on my pearls. I put on my shoes. I waited. I sat in the living room. I waited for the doorbell to ring. I waited for the battle to begin. I waited for the truth to land. They arrived at 1:55. Vanessa came in first. She was smiling. She was wearing a suit that cost more than my car. She carried a briefcase. She looked like a lawyer. She looked like a woman who won. David came in behind her. He looked tired. He looked like he had not slept. He avoided my eyes. He sat on the sofa. He looked at his hands. The agent came in last. She was young. She had a clipboard. She had brochures. She had a pen. She set them on the table. She smiled at me. She said she was excited. She said the market was hot. She said we could get a good price. Vanessa sat in the chair opposite me. She crossed her legs. She opened her briefcase. She took out a document. She slid it across the table. She said, "This is the listing agreement." She said, "Sign here." She said, "Sign here." She said, "Sign here." I looked at the paper. I looked at her. I did not pick up the pen. I folded my hands in my lap. I said no. Vanessa smiled. She said, "It is just a formality." She said, "We talked about this." She said, "You agreed." I said I would think about it. I said I thought about it. I said the answer is no. The antagonist was caught off guard. I showed their face. Confusion first. Her smile froze. It did not disappear, it just stopped moving. It became a mask. Her eyes widened slightly, the pupils contracted. She looked at David. He did not look up. She looked at the agent. The agent stopped writing. She looked at me. She tried to recalculate. She leaned forward. She put her hand on the paper. She said, "Joan, we have a buyer waiting." She said, "You cannot back out now." She said, "It is bad faith." I said, "I did not sign." I said, "There is no deal." I said, "There is no buyer." I said, "This is my house." Her hand went still. She set her glass down too carefully. The water did not ripple. She took a breath. She let it out slowly. She said, "David told me you were ready." She said, "David told me you understood." David looked at the floor. He said nothing. The panic was beneath the surface now. I could see it in her throat. I could see it in the way her fingers tapped the arm of the chair. 1 tap, 2 taps, 3 taps. She was losing control. She knew it. I knew it. The room was quiet. The clock ticked. The sun moved across the floor. I did not move. I did not blink. I waited. Vanessa denied. She threatened. She said I was being unreasonable. She said I was putting David in a difficult position. She said the grandchildren needed the money. She said the market would not wait. She said I was selfish. She stood up. She walked to the window. She looked out at the yard. She said, "This house is too big for you." She said you cannot maintain it. She said you are a burden. She turned around. She looked at me. Her eyes were hard. She said, "We will do it without you." She said, "We will get guardianship." She said, "We will sell it anyway." I looked at her. I said, "No." I said, "You will not." I said, "You cannot." I said, "The house is protected." She laughed. It was a sharp sound. It was not a happy sound. She said, "Protected by what?" She said, "You have no money." She said, "Charles left you nothing." She said, "I know the accounts." She said, "I saw the statements." She said, "They are empty." I said, "Not all of them." She stopped laughing. She said, "What do you mean?" I said, "You will see." I said, "Mr. Henderson is coming." She looked at David. She said, "Who is Mr. Henderson?" David said, "The lawyer." He said, "Dad's lawyer." He said, "I did not know he was involved." Vanessa said, "He is not needed." She said, "I handle this." She said, "I handle everything." I heard the conversation. I was in the hallway. The door to the powder room was closed. Vanessa was on the phone. She thought I was in the living room. She was saying a number. The number was familiar. I recognized it because it was the balance of my savings account. She said to the person on the other end, "Just declare her incompetent." She said it is faster. She said we can get guardianship. She said we can sell then. She said David will sign. She said he is on my side. I stood there. I did not move. I did not breathe. I waited. I let her finish. I let her condemn herself. I walked away. I went to the kitchen. I made tea. I waited for Mr. Henderson to come back. I heard David behind me. He was standing in the doorway. He was very still. He had heard her too. He did not speak. He looked at me. His face was pale. His eyes were wide. He looked at the hallway. He looked at the living room. He looked at his mother. He began to see. His expression showed it, not words, his face. The color drained from his cheeks. His hands started to shake. He looked at his wife. He looked at his mother. He realized what she had planned. He realized what he had allowed. He turned around. He walked back to the living room. He sat on the sofa. He put his head in his hands. He did not look at Vanessa. He looked at the floor. Mr. Henderson arrived at 3. He carried a briefcase. He was wearing a grey suit. He looked serious. He shook my hand. He shook David's hand. He did not shake Vanessa's hand. He sat at the table. He opened his briefcase. He took out a document. He laid it on the table. He said, "This is the Joan Wright Protective Trust." He said it holds $3,200,000. He said it was created by Charles Vance 5 years ago. He said it is irrevocable. He said it belongs to Joan. He said no one else can access it. He said no one else can sell the house. He said the house is an asset of the trust. He said the trust prohibits the sale of the primary residence without the beneficiary's consent. He looked at Vanessa. He said she cannot sell what she does not own. The moment the antagonist seized the document, Vanessa picked up the paper. Her hands were trembling. She read the signature. It was Charles's signature. She read the date. It was from 5 years ago. She read the terms. She saw the clause that prevented the sale. She saw the clause that prevented guardianship. She saw the clause that named me the sole executor. She dropped the paper. It fell to the table. It made a sound. It was loud. The silence in the room. What everyone else does. Mr. Henderson stood by the door. He did not speak. He watched. David was not there. He had left. The agent was packing her bag. She was leaving. She knew there was no commission here. The house was quiet. The clock was ticking. The refrigerator was humming. I was sitting in my chair. I was watching Vanessa. She was standing by the table. She was not moving. She was not breathing. She was frozen. The antagonist's first attempt to recover. She tried to speak. She said, "This is not fair." She said David is his son. She said he deserves something. I said he deserves a mother who does not steal from his grandmother. I said he deserves a wife who does not plot against his family. I said he deserves the truth. I said you gave him lies. She cried. She said I did it for the children. I said the children will learn from this. I said they will learn that greed has a cost. I said they will learn that respect is earned. The sound or image that ends the confrontation. She turned around. She walked to the door. She opened it. She stepped out. She closed it. The sound of the latch clicking was final. It was like a gunshot. It was like a period at the end of a sentence. It was over. I sat there. I looked at the document. I looked at the house. I looked at my hands. They were still. They were not smoothing my skirt. They were resting. The conflict is over. Consequences unfold across several weeks, compressed into 2 or 3 vivid scenes. Vanessa did not come back. David called me. He said he was sorry. He said he did not know. He said he was ashamed. I said I know. I said you are my son. I said I love you. I said come over for dinner. He came. He sat at the table. He ate the food. He did not talk much, but he was there. He started visiting every week. He brought his children. They played in the yard. They ran on the grass. They laughed in the room where Charles died. The sound was different now. It was not sad. It was life. Vanessa filed for divorce. I heard it from Mrs. Gable. She said she saw David moving his things out. She said she saw Vanessa crying on the porch. I did not go over. I did not check. I let it happen. I let them fix it. I let them learn. I stayed in my house. I paid the bills. I managed the trust. I hired a new gardener. I hired a new cleaning lady. I bought the expensive coffee. I drank it every morning. I sat at the table. I looked out the window. I watched the azaleas bloom. David made one choice. He sold his car and bought a house 2 streets away. He did not ask for money. He did not ask for help. He did it himself. He knocked on my door every Sunday. He brought groceries. He fixed the leaky faucet. He mowed the lawn. He did not say he was sorry again. He showed it. He showed up. That was enough. That was all I needed. I watched him through the window. I saw him teaching Matthew how to throw a ball. I saw him laughing with Lily. I saw him being a father. I saw him being a son. I saw him being free. The refrain phrase returns one final time. I was standing in the garden. It was spring. The flowers were open. The air was warm. I thought about Charles. I thought about the trust. I thought about the roots. The roots hold the tree, Ellie, not the leaves. I said it out loud. No one heard me. But the wind heard me. The trees heard me. The house heard me. It carried its full weight. It meant that I was the foundation. It meant that I was the one who stayed. It meant that I was the one who won. The narrator does not gloat. The narrator is shown doing something small and completely ordinary. I went inside. I walked to the kitchen. I put the kettle on. I waited for it to boil. I poured the water. I made the coffee. I sat in my chair. I opened the window. The breeze came in. It smelled like jasmine. It smelled like home. I took a sip. It was hot. It was good. I watched the sun go down. I watched the shadows lengthen. I watched the day end. That image is the moral. Never state the moral in words. I want to say one last thing to you. I know this story is long. I know it is heavy. But I needed to tell it. I needed you to know that you are not powerless. I needed you to know that you are not invisible. I needed you to know that sometimes the quietest woman in the room is the one holding all the cards. If you are going through this, if you are feeling this, please know that there is a way out. There is a way to stand up. There is a way to protect yourself. You just have to be willing to wait. You just have to be willing to know your own worth. The truth does not wait for the right moment. It arrives when it arrives. If this story reached you tonight, share it, like it, subscribe. Because next week I have a story about what happens after the envelope, after the silence, after you decide to finally put yourself first. Tell me your story. Have you ever had to fight for your place in your own family? Tell me where you are watching from. I read every single comment. And if you found peace in this story, if you found strength, please consider joining us here. We are a community of women who understand. We are a community of women who hold the roots. Thank you for listening. Thank you for staying. I will see you in the next one.